Welcome to episode 12. I'm Philip Ingram, and today I'm talking to Flavia Kenyon, another barrister with the 36 Group, and today we're talking fake news and more. Warning, you might actually learn something. Good afternoon, Flavia. Thank you very much indeed for talking to me.
Good afternoon, Philip, and thank you very much for having me.
Can you tell the listeners to this podcast a little bit about you, where you fit in, what are the areas that you specialise in?
Yes, so I have been a barrister for 15 years, and I have developed a particular expertise and interest in cyber litigation. Now, the topic of integrity of content, fighting disinformation and deepfakes is very close to me because I've been interested in this topic for a very, very long time. In fact, since I was a student studying English literature and reading Orwell, 1984. But even before then, going back to the year 1984, when I was growing up as a child, as a young adolescent, in a real dystopian society, it was a neo-Stalinist dictatorship, Ceausescu's Romania, where we were fed a diet of Orwellian double think and double speak, and language was used as a method of controlling thought, spreading ideology.
Yeah, it's fascinating you say that because the old Soviet bloc, the USSR, the Russians have a doctrine that they actively teach out, not just through their military communities, but it also pervades across all of the political structures that they have. And the doctrine is called maskirovka, masking. And it's all about spinning things, getting fake news out, as Donald Trump calls it today, but putting messages out in a way where they're using information to create an effect. And it's fascinating that you grew up with that.
Yes, so I grew up really with distrusting language that was put out on any form of media, albeit we didn't have access to lots of media at the time. But everything that was publicized, I was brought up and taught not to trust. Mm-hmm. Because it used a language that deliberately obscured and a language that deliberately was manipulated to hide the truth.
Yep.
For a political reason, which forward back in time to 2020, as you say, is nothing new, is not something that Trump has discovered. Fake news has been going on for a very, very long time. And disinformation, particularly now.
You know, I think we're seeing fake news developing a complete. Fake news seems to have taken on a complete face of itself, given the way the US president seems to accuse everyone of it all of the time, and given his comments on using disinfectant to internally cure COVID-19, it seems as if we don't need a lot of these fake news accounts to create disruption across the world.
Yes, absolutely. I did hear the president's announcement today, and it made me laugh. Yes, absolutely. It's very important, particularly in the current climate, really, to be able to tell fact from fiction and truth from lie. And the technology of which I talked about in my article of deepfakes, that technology really challenges the way we perceive reality, and is very powerful, or can be a very powerful tool in the wrong hands in spreading disinformation and fake news.
And deepfakes coming in, especially now whenever so much business is being done over electronic means, such as we're on Zoom at the moment, or Microsoft Teams, or other capabilities exist. If you could put deepfakes into that, it gives another layer to a fraudster's ability to try and influence things in a criminal way.
Absolutely. First of all, perhaps I don't know how many of our listeners are familiar with the concept, with the idea of deepfakes. I'll just very briefly explain it in very simple terms. Deepfakes really are synthetic media as opposed to real media. So what they are audio and visual content that has been digitally manipulated using artificial intelligence, making a person do or say something that they did not. There's a very famous or infamous, depending on how
Infamous, I
you see
think.
it.
Yes.
BuzzFeed Obama deepfake video. I think that's a very good illustration of showing, of basically teaching, if you like, people and giving them a stark warning and the need to verify content before holding it as truth. It uses the comedian Jordan Peele to give that warning, pretending to be Obama.
Yeah.
And the message really there is seeing is no longer believing. And that is, as I said, deep fakes in themselves challenge the very idea of how we perceive reality. And that becomes even more complicated because it obviously deep fakes operate in cyberspace. And as you say, they can become a very powerful cyber weapon, can be used for all sorts of purposes, fraud being one, absolutely. In fact, during my research, I have come across certain cases that have already happened where this technology was used in the form of voice cloning deepfake, where, for example, the user uses the copies successfully the voice of a CEO of a company and calls the company's secretary, for example, instructing the secretary to transfer funds to a compromised account. Yeah. That sadly has already happened. So the technology has become so advanced and has become more and more real, so therefore more and more difficult to detect.
I think the BBC brought this out into the public domain last year when they put their series, The Capture, I think it was called, on showing deep faking of CCTV imagery to manipulate the way investigations were going to go into some very nasty criminal activity.
Absolutely, yes, and it's very the very idea that if every video has the potential to be a fake, it offers therefore people the opportunity to challenge the veracity of genuine footage, for example. Yeah. So yes, you're right. It causes this very troubling situation where how are images going to be stills or moving? How are they going to be trusted as physical evidence, for example, in a criminal investigation, but in any investigation for that matter? Because what will happen is the position where an investigator or law enforcement in the future will have to prove not just what is false, but also what is true. So it has caused this, or has the potential to cause this very unusual situation where we cannot trust what we see. So therefore, we have to create a technology equally by using AI in detecting deepfake technology, using AI as a force for good, and creating deepfake detection technology as a way of ensuring that a system is able to certify the veracity of audio or visual content. And throughout my research, I have come across various companies and the software developments in the field of provenance checking, for example, which would be a way of authenticating third-party content, which would be very important for all media companies. And the BBC, for example, and I gave that as an example, the BBC has run a very successful service called Reality Check.
Fantastic service.
Yes, and that service really is there to authenticate factual content. So perhaps in the future, bearing in mind the threat of deep fakes, the BBC or any media company will have to invest in software which does a similar thing to authenticating audio and visual content in a similar fashion, because it's very important to be able to screen material before it's being broadcast.
Technically that shouldn't be too difficult because of the, I presume it's not being done at the moment, but the metadata that's at the back of any recording, you should be able to run through that and see if there are any changes in the metadata that would suggest that something has been edited at different points, or something else has been put in and changed.
Yes, exactly. So they can use that as a bank to compare and contrast the footage that they're dealing with, for example, or the audio that they're dealing with. Yes, absolutely. I think there are quite a few companies working in this area, and I think it will become more and more important, particularly in the light of the fact that there is at the moment a complete vacuum of, a regulatory, a legal vacuum, if you like.
Yeah.
So the government is proposing through white paper at the moment a new legal and regulatory framework to address online harms, which I think is fantastic. I think it's a salutary step forward. I think it will uphold the rule of law online, and I think very, very importantly, will introduce the legal concept of duty of care and responsibility, accountability on the part of tech companies, addressing a range of online harms, disinformation being just one of them, because there are so many harms out there that users are exposed to.
Well,
and at the moment,
interestingly, on that law, I was speaking to someone yesterday who had just come out of a meeting with the Home Office, and it's one of the top 2 priorities for the Home Office once we start to come out of this lockdown or start to get more normal activity going on. There's that, and there's the law that's looking at mandating basic requirements to crowded places on the back of the horrific attack in Manchester.
Yes, absolutely. And the use of deep fakes online and the potential for harm is vast, because with the growth of the technology, there's a need to regulate how content and to regulate the integrity and preserve the integrity of content online, and to be able to do something to counteract this growth of in technology. And the law can't keep up really with technology. And I think the government are doing a really good thing in introducing this idea of duty of care and of holding tech companies responsible, and also introducing there's a proposal for an independent regulator, for example, overseeing the framework.
So would that law, do you think, do something to ensure that tech companies stop these sort of botnets of accounts you see being set up and promoting either fake news or disinformation, or pushing out a propaganda piece to try and influence people rather than inform people correctly?
Yes, I think the government's proposal is to, of course, use this framework based on the test of proportionality. I mean, one must safeguard the freedom of expression, which is fundamental.
Yep.
But based on proportionality and on evidence of risk, I think the introduction of the duty of care, designed to ensure companies have appropriate systems and processes in place to safeguard people from harm online. And you're absolutely right. And there have been, just this month, to give an example, month of April, Twitter has been actually extremely proactive in this way, has taken down a network of more than 9,000 Twitter bots. And how this happened is also very interesting, is that a group of researchers uncovered the network by simply searching for coronavirus-related hashtags.
Okay.
And under the guise of coronavirus-related posts, a closer inspection of the accounts actually revealed that these accounts were used for political messaging. And these accounts, for example, were created on they had similar features. They were created on the same day within a short space of time. They had no followers. They were targeting special groups. And the primary purpose of the accounts was to amplify and spread ideology connected to certain countries. And had nothing to do with engaging with Twitter community. So Twitter took it upon itself to take down this bot network, which I think this is going to be the way forward. That is an example, if you like, of Twitter doing this in compliance with their duty of care. So this is exactly how the government's thinking, which I think is brilliant, is already happening on behalf of Twitter, for example. And there is the sort of growing and darker aspect to this bot-driven political rhetoric that has to be controlled,
Yep.
that has to be regulated. And deep fake technology is now apparently so easy to make. And on Twitter, anyone can set up a network of bots disseminating propaganda. Ceausescu in the olden days had an entire country, a network of informants spreading this. I'm sure were he alive today, he would have embraced deep fake technology.
Well, and we see the accusations from certain countries, certain nation states who have been trying to influence elections across the place. It's widely reported, the accusations that there are about Russian interference into U.S. elections, the elections into Europe and elsewhere, and that's something that is at the forefront of everyone's mind. Is this technology, in your view, something that is being exploited primarily by nation states, or is it organized crime gangs at a higher level, or is it both, or where is it sitting?
I think both, really. I think there are lots of actors, if I can call them that way,
Yes.
who use this technology because it is easy to use, as I said, and it gives the opportunity to address a vast amount of people worldwide. And there are state actors, yes. And in the case of Twitter, the accounts were linked with Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates.
Mm-hmm.
In other cases, groups spreading ideology using botnets with a purpose of discord and division and creating social unrest. It is troubling because it has immense power to disseminate propaganda and disinformation, and not around the world really have the digital literacy, if you like, and capability to be able to tell fact from fiction.
Yep.
And they are vulnerable. And that is why I go back to the government's idea of protection and of making sure that everyone is protected, irrespective of their digital literacy or not. It is a duty which should be embraced worldwide by all companies who operate online and who...
Given this, do you think, I don't know what the legal position is at the moment with regard to the fake news that's out there, and do you think that companies that allow their staff to repost stuff and all the rest of it have a wider duty of care to society and could leave themselves wide open, not just from a reputational perspective, but from a legal perspective, if they allow anything that falls into the category of fake news to be reposted through their accounts?
Well, at the moment, as I said, there's a legal vacuum. There's no offence of allowing fake news on a platform.
Okay.
Or publishing it on a platform. There's no offense there engaged. But what is going to be in the future with this new framework of protecting users, internet users from harm, the online harms white paper, that is the suggestion and the implementation of powers vested within an independent regulator to oversee how companies deal with such material, because it will inevitably trigger senior management liability if such content is allowed on platforms, on social media platforms.
Yeah, and that independent regulator is an essential component to ensure the freedom of speech remains sacrosanct?
Yes, so the independent regulator, the test will be based on proportionality, safeguarding freedom of expression, and of course, on evidence of risk of harm.
Mm-hmm.
And then the duty of care will be engaged and will be a balancing test for the independent regulator in overseeing this with powers to enforce, such as I think the proposal is to issue warnings, substantial fines, and even including business disruption measures, including internet service provider blocking, and as I said, senior management liability. So the user, the victim, if you like, will have a recourse, an address in law.
Okay.
So it is.
And is this going to form part of civil law or criminal law, do you think?
Well, at the moment, civil law, but I think the government will have to think how this will work hand in hand with criminal powers. At the moment, the Computer Misuse Act 1990 is the main act that deals with cyber criminal offences described as hacking offences. offences. And at the moment, that act is not really adequate to meet the harms caused by deepfakes.
No, the digital environment has changed hugely since 1990.
Exactly. But, it requires a bit of creativity, really. I mean, there's already there, built into the act, the idea of impairing the reliability of data.
Okay.
And I found a case going back to 2002 where the Court of Appeal was very creative in the interpretation and referred to material that tells a lie about itself would be sufficient to impair the operation of a computer. Well, deepfake technology is material that tells a lie about itself. So there's already there. There's a
criminal offence that's there at the moment. Interesting.
There is, but it's never been tested, you see, in the context of deepfakes. So there's a section 3 of the Act that talks about impairing the reliability of data, but that hasn't been tested. So it may or may not bite in a deepfake attack. And of course, it depends on the complexity of the attack, the sophistication of it.
Because and the difficulty a lot of the time is attributing the attack.
Exactly, because the algorithms are so complex.
Yeah.
It may be very difficult to attribute, yes.
And therefore, who do you prosecute?
Exactly, yeah. So that is why I think having an all-encompassing duty of care is a clever way by the government to proceed forward in ensuring a safer environment online.
Yeah, fantastic. So when's this due to come in? How is it going to affect the areas that you're working in, and who should be coming to try and seek advice from you in the run-up to this?
Well, we don't know at the moment the exact timescale that the government has in mind in introducing this piece of legislation. But I think from what you say, I think this is a top priority for the government, bearing in mind the disinformation with regards to COVID-19.
Yeah.
So I hope that it will come into force very soon. At least, I don't know, in the next couple of years, it should be up and running, I hope. That's my hope. As to who will be affected by this, well, all companies really that have, that provide services online.
Mm-hmm.
For users to interact with and to interact with themselves online. So it's very vast because a lot of what we do nowadays is online. So companies really would need to reassess their position with regards to this new regulatory framework and see if they come under it, if they offer such services to users. And if they do, they will have to seek legal advice and see what they can do in order to, for example, invest in deepfake detection technology, what cover they need in order to protect themselves and the senior management from liability, how the protection will work in actual fact. Is a protection, as I said before, on the lines of the BBC reality check factual content, how that's going to be upgraded to audio and video content, how authenticating third-party content will work. So all these measures will have to be thought through very carefully and implemented in order to protect themselves. Also, interpretation of the government's regulatory work, a framework that comes into force, that will be needed. And of course, they will have to keep in mind that there are powers that will be invested within the independent regulator that they will have to abide by. So it's a new world, really, in many ways.
A complete new world, but we're playing catch up. It's absolutely fascinating subject area.
Yes, it is,
and one we're going to hear more and more of, I suspect.
Yes, it is, and it's a new world for lawyers as well as it is for companies, and I think joined up thinking is required, and a lot of creativity as well is required.
Yeah, well, for the lawyers that are listening out there and any of the companies that are listening out there, I'll put the contact details for Flavia's clerks in the blurb underneath this podcast on my site. But Flavia, I could talk to you all day about this because it is a fascinating subject and it's one of my pet subject areas. As I said before we started recording this, I look to fake news back to the 6th century, to that great Chinese philosopher Sun Tzu, who said, all deception is warfare, all warfare is deception. And therefore, this is nothing new. But thank you very much indeed for giving up some of your time to talk to me on the Chatting with Ingram podcast series.
Well, thank you very much, Philip. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you.